So in the next 30 minutes we're going to talk about a project we call Farrowing Rate 95 or optimizing breeding performance. So this presentation will provide you some tips and tricks and major areas to focus on if we want to improve in this area. But as life is not only work, I will also talk about cars, beer and going to the restaurant. So you will see how this will fit together. We start with some numbers. So some current performance numbers out of our 700,000 cell proxy. Of course, the numbers are impacted by PED. What we see is the average and top 5 performance of some of the systems we receive data from. I think the main message is, while the average system is at 13.6% total born, we see the top 5% even one pick more. Farrowing rate also 6% difference. So the question is, what are the top 5% of the farms doing different compared to the average? And during the presentation we will focus on several areas. 30 minutes is very short, so I will only talk about the people aspect, the females, so gilts and sows, the semen, and some aspects about heat checking and breeding. Some of you might ask, why farrowing rate? Does that make sense? So here are some numbers to show you why it makes sense. For example, the 2% increase in farrowing rate will give us an additional 0.68 born alive PSY. Or a more defined example, in a 2500 sow system with a breeding target of 130 sows per week, this will end up in an additional $28,500. So not too bad, or in other words, the price of a brand new Ford Escape. So only 1% improvement will end up in a car in terms of money. So in my opinion, a thing to work for. So, setting the stage. What do we need to start working on this? We need some requirements. And this is of course a good health status in your herd, no feed and leg issues in the animals, solid gilt management and selection, very important to set, because gilts are our future. Also, if we get animals in, we have to get some out. So good parity profile and culling protocol, and of course superior genetics provided by PSC, I would say. Okay, let's start with the first pillar. That would be semen. And believe it or not, but semen and beer have more things in common than you think. For example, the optimum storage temperature. So somebody told me that for a good draft beer that would be around 46 Fahrenheit. Optimum storage temperature for semen, 61 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. How do we keep this temperature or maintain it? We have to unpack the doses before putting them into the fridge. We have to store the doses loosely and horizontally to keep an airflow and have the cold air arriving at the semen dose. The same thing works if you store your beer doses in the fridge. So, organizing semen following the first in, first out principle. So it makes sense to use a fresh product and use the oldest doses first. SCC temperature is very important in this process, so it makes sense to have a measurement. So what we want to do is check the temperature of the semen doses daily with a minimum maximum thermometer to make sure that we maintain the optimum temperature. Sometimes you see the case that we have semen doses arriving above the optimum temperature. What happens if we put these doses back into the fridge? That's what you see on this chart. So what happens is, if you put in the warm-up doses to the ones which are at optimum temperature, the whole fridge and the doses which are already in there will also warm up. So we have a kind of temperature fluctuation. And that's exactly what we want to avoid. As we know, as a rule of thumb, every plus minus 3.6 variation in temperature reduces the shelf life of our doses. Also important point, this cold chain doesn't end in the fridge. It's also how to take the doses to the breeding barn. So we want to keep the temperature by using an insulated container with gill packs. And I like to see this road or the way of the semen as a one-way road. So we don't want to return semen from the breeding barn back to the fridge. And as mentioned, temperature fluctuation is one of the reasons for this. Okay, what else do we need? Semen, and of course, a good female. So, female could be an eligible gill. I'm pretty sure you've heard all these recommendations 1,000 times, but in my impression it's very important, so I will repeat it again. What we need for a gill is body weight, 300 to 320 pounds. Typical age for that is 200 to 210 days. Good feet and leg quality. We want to breed them minimum 3 weeks from the last vaccination or other treatments, as this means stress to the female and will lower her performance. We want to have 95% of the gills breed after at least the second heat no service. We want to cull gills that show no heat no service after 6 weeks of Boar exposure. And you also, or always, should keep in mind that good gills are consistently good sows. So there is a study showing that 1 pig difference at P1 will end up in 0.2 additional piglets per farrowing in P1 to P5. I think it should be P2 to P5, yes. So if you ask me, a good investment. If we get animals in, we have to get animals out. So now we're talking about culling procedures. I see this as a production tool to maintain a high productive herd. So you always have to keep in mind, if you breed an animal, that's kind of investment in terms of time, semen, material, efforts. So you want to make sure that if you do a breeding, the female is suitable to give you good results. If we have animals with severe lameness, mastitis, general thickness, poor body condition, low number of functional teats, we know that, with a certain percentage, this animal won't get or farrow a good litter or grow it. Also, talking about late weaners, if we have more than 4 weeks for P1 and P2, or more than 1 week for P3 or 2, we should cull these animals. If we see abortions later than 10 weeks of gestation, we should also cull these animals. Okay, so that was semen and the female. Timing is also very important. And now we start our walk, or visit to the restaurant. And this will start with the order of courses. So having the right time, the right things, at the right time. We talk about movement. We have to keep in mind that every animal movement or rearrangement is stress for the female. And this stress especially becomes dangerous in the key phases of the repro cycle. If we have a look at this chart below, maybe I explain you what we see there. So on the x-axis, we have the time from moving the gills to the crates until breeding. So this is from day of breeding back to day 20. Here, the red bars are differences in born alive dependent on the day of moving. So what we see is, if we move animals 16 to 20 days prior to breeding, we achieve good results in terms of born alive. If we move them closer to the breeding, we will see some dips in performance. What's the reason? Reason 1 is because moving the animals is stress, and the reason 2 is the feed restriction after moving the animals. So what we want to avoid is this feed restriction during the last 2 to 3 weeks prior breeding to don't detrimental ovulation. An alternative, because this can be challenging due to your facilities, is to line up the gills at the day of breeding and service them 1 or more hours after movement. So, some more things about timing and what to do when. I think main course in your work is heat detection and breeding. And each of this one is very important. So we should keep them a separate course and focus on every single one of this. As in the restaurant, normally to have a good dinner, you want to have nice people beside you, maybe same age, same things to talk about. It's the same in the breeding bar. Avoid to place gills between older, aggressive sows in the breeding room. You should also have 2 hours between heat check and breeding to avoid the refractory period. So if you have stimulated the animal, it takes some time to get her back to a good stimulation. We should breed females the day they are found in heat and repeat breeding every day you found them in heat. So our goal is to have more than 90% of multiple matings in the inventory. Another point about movement, not move animals within 4 to 28 days after service, because this period is especially important for implementation of the embryo. When we talk about stress, of course it makes sense to ban the use of electric prods when moving the animals. Yes, this is kind of very hard stress. Some of you might work with loose housing, as we've already seen today at the tour, so I also want to give some tips about this. The main challenge is the competitiveness during the group formation. So what can we do to make this more easy? We say that small groups with 10 or less animals will fight more than groups of 60 or more. So bigger groups are more suitable. We should try to make the groups as similar as possible in terms of age, weight, and size. If we see aggressive sows, we should cull them or put them back to stalls, as they will lower the performance of the whole herd in terms of providing stress to the other animals. If we want to move sows to the pens, that should be 2 to 3 hours after feeding and in the afternoon, as the animals are a little bit more calm in this time. When we mix sows after implementation, so that's around about 30 days of gestation, to avoid early embryo loss during floating period. I think that was already mentioned in one of the form slides. So, to make a good choice, coming back to the restaurant, we need somebody who helps us. The restaurant, that would be the waiter, and our farms, that's the boar. He will help us to make the right choice, to pick up the right animals, to breed them. I think Dr. Mosquera already mentioned some aspects, what we need for a good boar. So I will go through this very shortly. We need an adult boar. We should replace them every 6 to 12 months. We need an active boar. Will perform better if you keep him happy and let him breed the cow sour or hand collect it once a week. And we should also not house him close to the sows, as they will get used to him. So, make your choice. Talking about estrus detection. This should happen once per day and every day. So, the animal doesn't care if it's holiday or Thanksgiving or whatever. She will come in estrus when her inner clock tells her. When we're doing estrus detection, we should use one boar for not longer than 1 hour at a time, as estrus detection is also challenging or hard work for the boar. Maximum of 5 sows per boar at the same time, that you can focus on every single female, nose-to-nose contact, and as always, remember the signs of estrus. So if we're doing estrus detection, you have to know what you want to see. So have an expectation on what you want to observe, to see it. Some benchmarking numbers. We want to have more than 92% of the sows bred by day 7. We want to catch more than 80% of the sows by week 4 of gestation, and another 15% by week 8 of gestation. In the end, and that's what Dr. Castro already told us in the main sessions, it's up to the people, so it's in your hands. Somebody once told me that a good stock person has the eyes to see, the mind to know how, and the attitude to do. So know what you want to see and doing the right things. And I think this attitude makes the difference between Averill and Joe to achieve high or low farrowing results. These numbers are taken from Dr. Flowers. They're already more than 10 years old, but I think it shows the difference. All people working in the same system, but achieving different results. So I expect that Joe is using the recommendations, or some of the recommendations out of this presentation. Coming to the main dish, breeding. We should only bred sows in solid standing heat. So make sure that she's able to receive and get pregnant if you inseminate her. Boar in front of 3 to 5 sows, 2 boars in a row, to have stimulation during the insemination. And after this process, stimulate the sow with back pressure, rubbing shoulders, flank and underline, so being the boar. Dessert. That's one of my favorites, and I think also very important. So the main point is to keep up stimulation after insemination. How can we do this? Leave the catheter in the sow, keep the AI bodies on, expose the sow to a second boar, or leave the boar roaming in the alleyway for some time to keep up stimulation and help the sow to transport the semen to the eggs. If we see backflow more than 10%, we should review our whole insemination process, check if the stimulation is done properly. Hygiene, also a very important point. Should keep the breeding rows as dry as clean as possible. Keep the vulva prior insemination. And very important point, keep the lubricant clean and store cooled. You always have to keep in mind that the lubricant will come into the sow. So I've seen some sow farms where the lubricant is stored somewhere within the dust, really dirty, and you transport all this into the sow. So if this happens, you will observe things like that. I hope everybody can see it. It's a kind of discharge at the tip of the catheter. So in the end, this is also good advice to see what's going on in the sow. Just have a look at the catheter, as this was in the sow and will see more than you from the outside. So somebody or some people of you will maybe use PCAI or uterine insemination. There are also some things to consider. In general, some new studies have shown that there is no need for a boar presence to stimulate the sow during insemination. If you're using a boar and feel comfortable with it, keep with it. It makes sense. But in the end, there would be no need. I think it's up to you how the people feel most comfortable while working. Backflow, very dangerous, especially with PCAI, as we have low volume and normally also lower semen concentration. If we see backflow, we should check the catheter position, maybe squeeze the dose a little bit less to make sure that the semen don't flow back. Another point, due to the low volume, mixing the semen dose prior insemination also makes sense, as we want the semen cells in the whole fluid and not in the bottom 10 milliliters. While insemination, if the inner rod does not go through the guide catheter with little pressure, it's better to move on to the next female and come back later. So give her some time to get used to it, calm down. And another good idea is to use the 5-to-1 technique. So go, put in 5 guide catheters. If the last one is set, go back to the first sow and start with the inner rod. This will also give the sow some time to relax prior to setting the inner rod, and normally it will pass more easy. So sometimes some things don't go wrong, don't go right. I like to call this repro hiccups. And for this repro hiccups, it makes sense to divide what is what. So we have regular and irregular returns. Regular returns we see around about 18 to 20 days after breeding, so after one cycle. So the problem normally should be located between the service period and the second week of gestation. If we talk about irregular returns, then will be seen later, so 25 to 35 days after service. Normally this happens if we have 5 or less piglets in the sow, so she will get a kind of signal that, in simple words, make her ask, is it worth the effort to have 150 days of gestation for only 5 piglets? So normally there will be a return and you have to breed her again. Target, less than 8% of total returns, and the ratio between regular and irregular returns should be not bigger than 3 to 1. Abortion and discharge. We talk about abortions. There are micro-abortions and regular ones. Normally, you won't see the micro-abortions because due to the slatted floor or group housing, the material will just disappear, so you won't see it. While regular abortions are usually seen in the late gestation, so you see, more or less ready pigs at the back of the sow, in the back of the sow. Target is to have less than 1.5%. Can have a lot of reasons for abortions. Some are mentioned here, so that includes infectious agents, management factors, I think that's the main point, and other cases like stress, lameness, or things we can avoid with cutting recommendations. Discharge and uterine tract infections. Discharge is normally seen in the period between breeding and 3 weeks after breeding, while uterine tract infections can occur at any time of gestation. If we see discharge, we should control our hygiene. So if we have contamination in the breeding or farrowing process, and we should also ask ourselves, do we breed the sows only in standing heat? Because only if she's in standing heat, the immune system will be ready to face the germs that we take in, because there is no kind of sterile or insemination without having any bacteria getting into the cell. Some reasons for early detection of these fallouts, non-productive days or non-pig sows. So to give you some numbers, for a non-pig sow, the cost for 115 days of gestation would be $230. So now you can do a simple calculation. How many NIPs will take away your Ford Escape? I think that's around about 120. If you are able to detect these issues early, you can work on possibilities for intervention and review your processes to solve these issues. Last slide, things to take home. To achieve 95% farrow rate, all variables means the female, the semen, and of course you, the people, have to work at 98% or more. The competent stock person has the eyes to see, the mind to know how, and the attitude to act in the right way. Proper estrus detection, breeding, and good semen quality and handling are keys to improve farrowing rate. And make the right culling decisions to maintain a high productive breeding herd.